Silence. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Well, hello, Aaron. Thank you for having me. Let's have a life-changing conversation.
It's my pleasure. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I'm the space where all healing is possible. What I mean by healing is freedom. And my number one priority is for kids to have healed parents and for pain patterns and generational trauma cycles to break with the generational healer in the family. And I think this audience is chock full of people that care about being their best, getting the most out of their lives, and being their best for the world. So this is a show I'm very excited to be on.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. What's your journey been like then from sort of childhood, really, I suppose, until where we are at today?
I grew up in domestic violence. And one of the things I think that's really unique about my story is I decided really young I wanted to be the best version of myself that I could be. And I graduated high school, went into training to become a music therapist, ended up with a master's in counseling, worked at a state psychiatric hospital in Denver, Colorado. I had all this understanding. I was still bulimic. I was still abusing alcohol. And I found myself in my own domestic violence marriage at 23 because understanding trauma isn't enough to break the cycle and to really have a new experience of life beyond how we experienced life growing up. And it took me getting out of a domestic violence marriage with a 2-year-old to really take on mastering relationship and healing and breaking patterns and cycles. So I have a unique background because I am a trauma specialist and I'm a therapist, but I'm also a coach. And I really specialize in going beyond the mindset and strategy work, going beyond the understanding, because I almost think it's worse, Aaron, to understand the pattern, to understand the trauma, but you're still in it. Right? Like it's one thing to not even know what's going on. It's another thing to know, and you can't escape the hamster wheel. So my work is about what I call the practice of emotional healing, getting out of the mind so that you can get into your heart, so that you can get into your body, so that you can connect to your spirit from a place where you're regulated emotionally, fully emotionally available, fully free, no matter what's happening.
Yeah, it seems to be that if you grow up in domestic violence, then you tend to, I suppose you get drawn to that kind of person as well, because that's what you know as well as a child, I suppose. So you get to kind of put yourself into that situation again, which a lot of people never get out of. So how did you kind of get out of that marriage? How did you kind of get to that point where this is enough?
Yeah, well, and I think the thing about patterns is we attract what we haven't healed yet until it's healed. That's what I call attraction 101, right? So my first marriage was my childhood on repeat. And what most people do without meaning to is they create family as adults, but they're still experiencing family the way they did growing up. So I say there's a direct correlation between how you feel in the family you created and chose for yourself compared to how you felt growing up. So, how you break the cycle, how you stop the madness, how I got out was realizing I'm a vibrational match for this extreme horseshit. I'm still a vibrational match for the experience of being a battered woman, for the experience of being silent. Rebecca Silence is my last name. I married a guy with the last name Silence because I was still so committed to silence. I was afraid to make things worse. I was afraid of conflict. I was afraid to rock the boat. And I thought my voice would only make things worse. And I was such a vibrational match for that belief system and pattern and experience that I married a guy with the last name Silence. And I kept it because I love who I've become. But for me, the truth is, I didn't have the self-worth to get out for me. I got out because I had a daughter and I refused to be a mom that was aware that this environment is toxic and dangerous for her and kept her in it. So for me, and I say for all of you out there, regardless of your gender, if you can't up level your life for you, find someone or something to do it for in the moments that you just don't have it in you to do it for you. For me, it's always been my oldest.
Yeah, kids have that power over us, right? And when they come along, they kind of change our whole perspective on life.
Yeah, and I just wanted to be a mom that she could be proud of. I wanted to be a mom I could be proud of, and I completely reinvented myself, but it was terrifying. I knew I was going to go bankrupt. I knew I'd lose my house, which we did. We foreclosed on the house. I went bankrupt. I had to work 3 jobs. I never got child support. My ex-husband signed rights to my daughter over to me exclusively right away when she was 2. So it was all on me, and I had no confidence and I had no self-worth. I had a lot of talent and a lot of brilliance, but I didn't believe in myself yet, and I was in no way ready to own my power or own my greatness. But what kept me going was I wanted a life for my daughter that was so different than the life I had been living, especially when it came to life at home. And what I tell people is, get clear on what you're living for that's bigger than you to keep you going, and then just baby steps. And it's so cliche, but it's so true. Like, all you need every moment is just one next right for you next step. And I like to say there isn't right and wrong, but there is what's right for you and there is what's wrong for you. And so if all you do is tap into what's the next right step for me, my God, is that enough?
Yeah, I think once we understand ourselves a bit and we kind of look within and see who we are, what we want out of life, and how we want to live our life, then it's about having that courage to pursue that, right? And like you say, it's that one step at a time, making them decisions, and then it can snowball and become that bigger picture to create the life that you actually want to live.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I wrote, Coming Back to Life, my book. It's a roadmap to heal from pain to create the life you want. And it's a masterclass and a Bible to figure out who you really are. Because I think it's really easy, Erin, you know, to talk about, okay, who am I? If I just would show up every day, the truth of who I am, life would be great. We get that in theory, but what we don't know is who we really are. And in almost 20 years of private practice work, my clients, the number one question that stumps them when I ask it is, what do you want? Right? Because who you are knows what you want, but almost nobody can answer that question because they're filtering through all of their programming of what's acceptable and what's not, and what they should want and what they shouldn't want, and what they think is right and what they think is wrong. And so, what I like to say is, we're all bipolar, meaning we all have a survival self that we created to be the right version of ourselves in our family of origin. And for some of you, that was the in trouble kid. For some of you, that was you as the scapegoat. For some of you, you were the good child. You were the golden child. You were the star. For some of you, you were just this lost, invisible child, right? But who you were growing up isn't who you are. But it's likely who you are showing up as in your family as an adult still, because that's what you have associated family with. So if you can wake up one day and recognize, my survival me isn't me. And how do you know your survival you feels like crap? Your survival you feels disconnected and misaligned. And it just feels like you're half alive going through the motions when you're sourcing from that version of you created to survive. And so you're going to wake up one day and recognize, there's got to be more. There's got to be more to life. This can't be all there is. But what we don't wake up one day and know is who we are. So it just starts with that recognition and that ownership of, this isn't who I am. So that from there, you can design who you want to be. And that doesn't have to be a painful process. And that doesn't have to mean you're threatening what you've built. It's just about you fully expressed and free is your birthright. and we can get back there and we can design it.
Yeah, it's important that we do find ourselves like that, because I think otherwise, if we go through life wearing that mask, like you say, or trying to fit in a particular box that's not quite us, then it's just sad, unhappy, and pretty miserable.
It is. And who are we trying to please? And what are we living for? Are we trying to please everybody but ourselves? Are we living for avoiding conflict and avoiding rocking the boat? Or are we living for honoring and respecting and taking care of ourselves and stepping into our right to have a magically delicious, blissfully joyful experience of life, no matter what's going on around us?
Absolutely. If you could go back and speak to the younger version of yourself, the one silently enduring the abuse, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that she already knows how powerful she is and that there's nothing outside of her more powerful than her ability to stay her, and that it's going to get so good. My story is wild because it really prepared me to not be afraid of any case in front of me. There's no case that's gonna be shocking to me. I've coached so much dark and I've coached so much light, and I would just tell little Rebecca to hang in here because it's going to get glorious. And she will have her dream of love. She will have her dream of family. And she will have a life and a business where she gets to serve the people that actually want to heal and grow and transform and serve the world from their most healed selves. And it's just going to be a magically delicious life. And just hang in here. And she is and has everything she needs.
What's been the most painful lesson you've had to learn on your journey, and how has it shaped who you are today?
Part of my story is after getting out of the domestic violence marriage, creating this gorgeous business that really took off practically overnight. I went full time with my private practice, got on a top 40 radio station in New York, and within 2 weeks, my business was launched and I had a 6-month wait list. It was wild. I got married again. I thought I had everything that I ever wanted. And I really had thought I beat my past. And then I got diagnosed with cancer while I was 7 months pregnant with my second baby. And the most painful lesson that I've ever had to learn was that achievement isn't it. What I call high functioning unhappiness isn't it. And I was doing so much, but I wasn't free. I was achieving. I was working literally with 10 clients a day, back to back, 7 days a week with this wait list, very much feeling good about on paper. I was doing everything I said I would do, but there was still this emptiness, and we talk about high functioning depression, we talk about high functioning anxiety, high functioning addiction, but we don't talk about high functioning unhappiness. So I found myself with a cancer diagnosis, with my dream come true life, being told I had a 5% chance to live, Aaron. That was it. And I thought, this can't be right. I'm not done yet. There's so much more I want to do. But what I realized and what was really painful is life isn't about achievement at all. It's about high functioning happiness and alignment with my own soul. And I had to completely surrender because I had no control over whether or not I lived or died. And I ended up having what I really would describe as the ultimate seminar going through cancer, because my only job was to really figure out how to be who I said I was, even in the face of my whole life falling apart. And then the difference between cancer and my domestic violence marriage was I wasn't the unhealed, trauma riddled Rebecca by the time the cancer diagnosis struck. I was the healed me, but I had to learn how to stay the healed me, letting go of achievement, resting in my unshakable wholeness and alignment. And that was a painful journey, but a very liberating, beautiful journey.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to touch on there because that's quite a lot to deal with. How to,
Yeah,
understatement.
yeah.
Um, how do you stay grounded when life throws challenges like that at you? Like, like a cancer diagnosis that is so huge and life changing, and it makes us really see our mortality and kind of see things in a completely different way. So how did you cope with that challenge?
Well, what I realized is that my only job is to be the best of me in the moments when life is going my way, but even more in the moments where life is not going my way. And for me, it was really about giving up my ego as much as possible and knowing I don't have control over whether or not I live or die, but I have a lot of control over living in my values, resting in my values, and connecting to my source. I call it God, call it the universe, call it love, call it nature, whatever it is for you. But spiritually, you know, cancer changed my life because ever since cancer, my life has just been a co-creation with God. And what I do is I focus on what am I thinking? And are these thoughts worth following? Thoughts to turn the volume up on, or thoughts to turn the volume down on? Are my thoughts taking me in the direction of alignment or in the direction of misalignment? And then from there, and this is what I teach my clients as well, we go from our head, which we don't hang out there too long. It's a really dangerous place to be because we have our ego fighting with our highest self, and almost always that fear based survival ego self wins. So just checking in, where am I in consciousness? Huge, but I don't stay there long. I start with the mind so I can connect with my heart and pay attention to how am I feeling? And is it how I want to be feeling? And from there, I can connect to my body, which knows what I need. And from there, I can connect to my spirit that knows what I want. And from there, I can plug into God and I can just be guided. And I really love being guided. This book came through me listening to Lil Wayne in a hotel room. And I don't really take credit for it. I was like, help me find the words, And it was a few different hotel, weekends listening to Lil Wayne, which is so funny to me. But my guidance was just like, go. And I had a blast. And I try to be this open channel every morning. I'm like, get Rebecca out of the way. What would you have me do? What would you have me know? What would you have me see? What would you have me say? And to who? And more and more and more, there's not anything to do except be and focus on the next aligned step. And I think it's really challenging for people to have to sit in the space of there's nothing to do, and that's what cancer forced me to do because there was nothing to do. I had a 5% chance to live. I had a baby I couldn't even hold. I had 21 surgeries. What I had was a malignant melanoma that was already in my lymph nodes. And this diagnosis was almost exactly 10 years ago. So treatment was very limited. And my guidance told me to quit chemo in the middle of chemo, which I did. And that's scary, to trust the guidance and to have faith that it's correct and to not try to outsmart God and your guidance and trust it. That's daunting. That's hard, but it's so freaking worth it. And all I know is you're the one that you've been waiting for. You have your answers, but you don't have to figure it out. You can let it be. You're so clear that you're shown. And I would never tell anybody quit chemo. But what I will tell you is you already know, and it's safe to trust your guidance. And you have your answers. Nothing outside of you does. And then I think the next most important thing to point out here is I don't want you to wait for a breakdown to break through. I don't want you to tolerate high functioning unhappiness until things get worse. I want you to give yourself permission today to decide as a man, as a woman, regardless of your gender, you be someone who, after today, decides to fully live. I called my book Coming Back to Life, not because of all of the crazy I've survived, because honestly, the greatest testimony in my life that healing is possible is the life I have now. It's not about what I've overcome. But my clients tell me over and over and over again, I came back to life working with you in the first 5 minutes, almost always. And most of these gorgeous souls, thousands through my private practice over the years, they didn't even know they weren't alive.
Yeah, it's difficult because we live our life um, in a box really that we've put ourselves in because of what we've learned through school, through our family, through our relationships of how other people expect us to be, and we don't really spend that time to figure out who we are and to live that life on our own terms. And like you said, a lot of the time it's about getting out of our own way. We're always thinking, oh, we need to do something to be happy. Actually, we need to remove things and allow ourselves to be in a natural state and just be ourselves, just live naturally.
Absolutely. And that's freedom. And I'm just thinking about this gorgeous man I coached once whose wife was cheating on him and hell bent on leaving him. And he was devastated. And he said, Rebecca, like, I can't survive it if we don't save this marriage. And I specialize in saving marriages, but I need two willing participants committed to doing the work, right? I can't make your partner want to reinvent the relationship with you, right? So I remember saying to this guy, hold on a second. Why is it more important to not lose her than it is for you to not lose you in the name of trying to keep her? What if the only thing you have to lose is you? Don't you dare let that happen. And this case was wild, Aaron, because they got divorced and she stayed miserable. She thought divorcing him would give her her power back, would give her her life back, but she didn't heal her patterns. She didn't heal on an identity level so that she could outwit, outsmart, and outlast her survival self and be her highest self. He did all the work and he started a new business, found a new relationship, got married again. He's happy as a clam. And she's still sitting in where she was stuck, where she stopped herself from doing the deeper work. Because what nobody tells you is when you heal through survival, you think you're going to die, but you're not. You're being reborn. And I just love this story because this guy got to see A, he was never the problem. B, he gets to be this sensitive, emotionally free, emotionally open, emotionally available man, father, husband, community leader, business owner. And that's all he ever wanted. And he has it. And there really was nothing to lose except himself. And he didn't let that happen. And it just warms my heart to think of his now life. And he thought the be all end all was this miserable marriage to somebody that didn't want him. And that's hardly the be all end all. And how many of you are settling for crumbs because you're afraid to rock the boat? And in most cases, you can save the relationship if you're brave enough to lead and reinvent it. But the ones that are dead in the water, you can't stop that train. And it's okay to let go of what isn't aligned so that your life is in full alignment with you.
Yeah, it's something that I've picked up on, and I don't know if you have through your work, but it always seems to be the people that are on this journey who are rebuilding themselves who actually get to that point where they finding that happiness. I've all been through some trauma, be that relationship trauma or some form of personal trauma that's essentially destroyed the person who they originally were. That's made them then have to refocus and rebuild and become this new version of themselves. Is that something that you see a lot? It's always a I wouldn't say always, but majority of the time there's a trauma involved first.
Oh my gosh, we are all 100% sourcing from a trauma response when we're operating in high functioning unhappiness, and there is no one immune to trauma. And if we just define trauma as heartbreak, it doesn't have to be this crazy story of abuse. We are all people who care and love, and we all have love trauma. We all have heartbreak. So if this idea of generational trauma just feels too much, or if you're sitting here listening and going, well, I don't have Rebecca's story, so I don't have trauma. No, I had a mentor once, Aaron, who said, it doesn't matter if you're pinned under a Mack truck or a Toyota, you're in trouble. Right. And so if our life is a reaction to guarding our hearts against more heartbreak, that's a trauma response. And again, we don't have to wait for things to get worse. We don't have to wait for a crisis. We don't have to wait for a breakdown to give us permission, or a big drama to give us permission to own, wait a minute, here's what I want, here's what I need, here's how I feel. And this isn't good enough for me. We can just decide that the part of us that wants to go into fight, flight, freeze, there's so much more to life. The fourth option is the healed you. But what most people are doing is spending all of their time fighting, flighting, running, and freezing. And many of us don't even know it. And this isn't just at home, because at work with your team, I joke that when I'm doing corporate training, it's all family coaching because you're not upset with this person. She just reminds you of your sister. He just reminds you of your stepfather. This one just reminds you of the mean teacher that told you were never going to amount to anything, or the abuser, or whatever, right? But it's all family coaching. It's all family relationship dynamics when it stings and burns and hurts. And your only job is to decide that it is okay to experience life beyond fight, flight, freeze. And the way I think about it is when I fight the river, when I fight this person, I'm just fighting with the ghosts of my past. When I'm running away, I'm guaranteeing the patterns continue, whether that's an affair, whether that's workaholism, whether that's not taking care of my nutrition and sleep and physical body. But however you're running away and numbing out and escaping, it keeps the patterns alive and well. It keeps the past winning instead of you winning. And same when we freeze. When we freeze, that's the deepest form of the trauma response because our nervous system literally doesn't believe it can handle the moment it's in. But all that's happening is the moment is reminding you of a very deep wound. And the freezing is how we're trying to powerlessly take our power back. And if all we can do is know, okay, I want to freeze, I'm not going to let myself. I'm going to breathe and I'm going to say, I don't like this. Even that is enough to knock a cycle in a whole new direction, right? So to get out of freeze, you've got to break the silence. You've got to use your voice. To get out of fight, you've got to go, I don't want to be the same energy of what happened to me that hurt me. So instead of fighting, I've got to breathe. I've got to regulate. I've got to take a break. And same with when you want to run away. What's a healthy way to step out of feeling victimized by the situation and nurture and honor yourself without running? Because fight, flight, freeze gives so much power to the moment, to the person in front of you. And let me just tell you, the person in front of you is not personally hurting you or attacking you. They're doing what they do. So if it wasn't you, they'd be doing the same thing with somebody else. But you don't have to fight, flight, or freeze. You can do the deep work. And I created a Bible for you. I created a guide, a roadmap. There's literally a map for before you're in crisis or for before things get worse, to take your life back, to take your voice back, to take your passion back and your power back. It's all right here for you.
Rebecca, when we talk about fight, flight, freeze, there's a lot of people. I don't know the justification behind it, but there's a lot of people who've added the fourth one now, the fawn, which is people pleasing essentially, and going along with it. What would your advice be for those kind of people who are in that situation, who are kind of just pleasing people or going along with something that they're not happy with?
Yeah, I think of fawn as a way to cope with the need to fight, flight, freeze, right? And the people pleasing epidemic is real. And we can call it people pleasing, we can call it fawning, but the number one thing I want us to know is when we're more focused on what other people need, whether it's what they've told us or what we're imagining they need, because so often we're anticipating other people's needs and it's not even real, right? We're playing God. But what's really going on underneath it all is we're trying to avoid conflict. And when we do that, instead of going, bring it, bring it, bring it, bring it, I want to know what's real. I want to see what's real. I want to face what's real so that I can know I left no stone unturned. So I can know what's real about this relationship. So I can know how badass and powerful I am, right? But people pleasing, it just guarantees you being more heartbroken, you silencing yourself. Essentially, what it is you betraying yourself in the name of love. And self betrayal, it's the opposite of love, Aaron. And we do it in so many ways that are subtle that people wouldn't even know that's what we're doing. And it looks so good, right? And our society globally, not just in the United States or in the UK or wherever you are, in the world, we glorify compromise yourself, sacrifice yourself, betray yourself. And that's what makes you a good leader. And that's what shows the world how much you care. Actually, it's the opposite. You pleasing everybody but you betraying yourself. It's like you're raising your hand and saying, hey, world, go ahead and betray me. Go ahead and reinforce and reflect back to me how much my needs don't matter, how much I don't matter, how much my voice doesn't matter, because you're taking a stand for this is what I'm up to. How we treat ourselves is the best we're going to get treated. Period. End of story. So when you're people pleasing, you're self betraying, and you're training everybody else, it's okay to betray you because you don't think you're sacred at all when you're betraying yourself. So put that in your pocket and no judgment, right? You don't get to use any of this as more ammunition against yourself. But when you want to please, I want you to go, hold on. What if I was focused on what pleases me right now and pleasing me and then dealing with the situation?
Yeah. What one piece of advice would you give those people, the ones that have lost their own voice and are kind of just going along with everything else from the people around them to keep them happy, and maybe they've got to a point where they don't even really know who they are anymore, or what they
Right.
actually want.
Right. Well, and that's what keeps us in the cycle of self betrayal and self abandonment. It's because we don't know, which we touched on earlier. But a great exercise is to just get out a piece of paper and to write down if I was being honest with myself, here's what I want, here's what I need, here's how I feel. I need, I want, I feel is the ultimate breaking the silence starting point, identifying it within yourself. And if you don't know what you want, if you know what you want for other people, my hack is what you want for them is almost always what you really want for you. And we do this. This is a whole other Oprah and can of worms, but we won't let ourselves have more often than what we saw our parents have, even if we know it's possible, even if we know other people can have it. So give yourself permission to just imagine it's safe to give yourself what you want for everybody else before they have it. Because often, if my mom can have her voice, then it's okay for me to have mine. Or if my mom can let herself have money, then it's okay for me to, or if my dad can let himself relax and enjoy the weekends, then it's okay for me to, whatever it might be. But what you want for them is what you want for you. And if you just know what you don't want, the other hack is make a list of the top 10 things you're over it. You don't want this anymore. You don't want your wife, treating you like crap and not valuing you. Well, okay, what is the opposite of that? And then give it to yourself. Don't put it on the people in your life to give you what you think you need so that you can have it. Decide you're going to give it to you.
And that's an interesting point, actually, that we need to get better at is actually learning to say no to the things we don't want. We're terrible for it, I think, and that's what really gets us into these situations where we're really unhappy because we've made a load of decisions to people please somebody else, not saying no when we should have, and then we kind of back ourselves into this corner and create this image of this is who we are, and then we kind of almost have to live up to that then because we've created that image, and it becomes a really difficult situation to be in.
It does. But guess what? You can reinvent yourself anytime. My clients say yes to reinventing their lives instead of saying yes to their resistance, right? And it's not easy, but I don't want you uncomfortable because you don't want to make other people uncomfortable. Let them be uncomfortable if they're going to be uncomfortable. And, it's never going to be safe enough to be fully you. And so many of you are picking and choosing who it's safe to be yourself around, who it's safe to be the best of you around, who it's safe to be honest with, who it's safe to open your heart to. And I want you to have boundaries. Not everybody needs to know your whole story or, what's really going on underneath the surface. But you can still show up as the essence and the truth of you, no matter who's in front of you. And until you're there, you're not free. And you can just start practicing this week. If I was honest and not worried about their reaction, how would I show up? What would I say? What would I do? But more importantly, who would I be? Stop picking and choosing because it's never going to be safe enough to take your life back to be you and to see who shows up when you're you and who wants you to dim it down. I'd rather know who wants me to dim it down so I can adjust accordingly versus being afraid to find out. And you can't find out unless you show up.
Yeah, and sometimes I think, it's about if we are ourselves, if we're, vulnerable enough to put ourselves out there, be who we really are, we'll attract the right people anyway into our lives, and we'll be surrounded by the people who actually we can have genuine, proper connections with.
Yeah. And you're going to attract fake people if you're fake. And when the representative, the you think they need you to be, is the one showing up to the relationship, there's no relationship because they're relating to a fake person. And this is good news. This isn't bad news. This isn't me calling you out. But if you feel called out, there's something here for you. What would it be like to not really care about them being uncomfortable? Because what you care about is you being as you as possible. And you being you isn't you lashing out. You lash out because you weren't you enough. You being you isn't you frozen. You freeze because you weren't you enough, right? You running away isn't you being fully you. It's you're running away because you haven't been fully you and you're looking for a way to get back to it, right? And that's the crazy dance of fight, flight, freeze. And you can throw fawn in there too. Either way, you're not being you enough and you're trying to find a way to be you again. But fight, flight, freeze, fawn is you doubling down on not being you, actually.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? When you are, because I'm kind of on that journey, and I kind of it's taken me 39 years. It's taken me a long time to get there, but I've got to that point where I'm willing to be myself and vulnerable, and I'm not interested in pretending anymore or playing those games, and it brings you a level of peace and calm that I've never had before, and it's really nice to have. But I'm also aware there's still a work in progress. There's still moments when I kind of slip back into old habits. I'm like, oh, and I need to readjust.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to be human. The goal isn't the absence of our humanity. It's to know in this moment, am I emotionally clear or not? In this moment, am I free or not? And once you recognize, now just what's the next right step that would get you closer to freedom, get you closer to being more you? and it's enough. And it's going to be, trial and error, but we don't need to try to spiritually bypass our humanity, right? Like we're here for the full human experience. But I think, another big important part of this conversation, Aaron, is just acknowledging we're meant to receive the good. But so many of us are just bracing for disappointment and we're afraid to trust the good. And I write about this in the book because I don't want you afraid to let joy and excitement become the rule you live by. But I think so many of us think the more joyful we are, the more excited we are, the more good it is. Well, when's the other shoe going to drop? When's the bad going to happen? But life is just being life. It's not you got happy and now something bad happened. That bad thing, the perception of it being bad, it was always going to be what it was. That's not your fault. That's not because you got happy. But again, you can be the best of you. You can rest in joy and excitement in the preferential moments, in the non preferential moments. And it doesn't need to take you waiting for a breakdown to give you permission to enjoy your life. I was just watching Grey's Anatomy and, someone's dying and they're making a list of, well, what do you want to do before you die? How about we start living now while we're in our prime?
Yeah, it's one of the things that bugs me, that it's kind of the society, the Western kind of culture, at least now, is that you go to school, maybe you go to college, university, you get a good job, you work until you're well, probably at this rate 70, and then you enjoy your last 5, 10 years. That's an awful way to look at life.
Absolutely. And you can create your life and design it on your terms. But that starts with doing the deep work to design you, to reinvent you. You can't reinvent your life before you've reinvented yourself. And this doesn't have to be Everest, which is why I gave you, let me spoon feed you everything you need to know, not to take your life back Rebecca's way, because I'm not the coach that says, I know what you need. I know what the right way is for you, like many coaches. I'm here to say, you have your answers. My process will help you find them.
Yeah, it's got because it's different for everybody, right? Everybody is
Right.
different. Everybody wants to live differently. You can't have a blueprint of this is how you got to live for everybody because it's not going to work for everybody. And that's the whole point of finding yourself, right? Because if it worked for everybody, we'd all have a blueprint already.
100%. But we all have that survival self and our highest self. And we all have the ability to know the difference between when we're sourcing from survival or when we're sourcing from our highest. But it is so different, the healing process for everybody, right? Some of you, for example, I just had 2 different sessions already this week where one woman was healing her inner victim by tucking her in at a Four Seasons. One wanted to do a proper burial of her inner victim, and it was very different. And I'm not here to say what's right and what's wrong, but I'm here to help you put that victim to rest so you can be free. And we'll find what that looks like for you.
Yeah, how it's it's difficult for people, I think, to get to that point though, is the issue. And I think, often it takes traumatic events or them to be in crisis to get there. How do we get to people before that? Like I said, with me, it took me 39 years. How do
Yeah.
people get to that point sooner? Because there's a lot of life for people to live, wearing a mask and being somebody they're not.
Well, I do think it starts with a decision to commit to your life, to commit to getting the most out of your life. And commitment is such an interesting conversation because so many people see commitment as a trap. Like, if I commit, now I'm limiting myself. But it's actually the opposite. And the truth of the matter is, there's nobody out there that isn't already committed. You don't have commitment issues. It's just your commitment might not be going in the direction of your highest and best. But we're all committed because we're committed to every choice we're making. So if you're waiting for things to get worse, if you want to believe you must break down to break through, you have every right to believe that and to play that out. But that's just a lot of unnecessary suffering. And if you can decide to commit to your life now, that is the starting point. And you can. And if you want to be stubborn and go, well, I'm not going to do that yet. I don't want to limit myself yet. Okay. How much worse does that have to get? Do you want 5 more years of hell? 5 more minutes of hell? 50 more years of hell? I just had a client hire me who was 78 and her husband had just died. And so she felt like she had permission now to take her life back. On one hand, I'm so grateful she called me when she did so that we can give her a glorious next season and last act. But at the same time, it's so sad to me to think she didn't think she could be free until her husband was dead. And I had a guy client who had to wait for his dad to die. And then he was taking his life back. And we don't need to wait. And we don't need permission. And let the world catch up to you owning your power or not, but you owning your power and you living your best life now, not later. Nobody can do for you. And it starts with a decision and an intention and a commitment, an all in commitment, not a I want it. And I think there's 3 different types of people. So as I share this with you, think about where you are on the map. The first is very happy with good enough is good enough. And they might bitch and complain, but they're happy with good enough is good enough. The second wants it, but they're not willing to commit. The third wants it and they are willing to commit. And none of it's wrong or bad. But until you've decided, I call it like decide to decide, decide to decide to live, decide to commit to your life, and nobody is going to be like, good job in my experience. Most people are going to protect you from yourself. When I started my company, nobody told me it was a good idea. When I quit chemo, nobody told me it was a good idea. When I decided to be free and fully expressed and break the silence in my life and take my life back, nobody thought it was a good idea. People will try to caution you against you and your power because the world is going to have a reaction. But I'm the coach that says, let them catch up or they miss out. But it's their loss, never yours. High functioning unhappiness is no way to live. And that's how you're living if you're exhausted, if you're stressed, if you feel pressure, if you're disappointed. It's time to decide to live. And you don't need to know what that looks like yet. That's just the next step. That's just the first step. And then get your hands on this award-winning book and do the work. In every chapter, I give you exercises at the end because I want this to be your life. I want this to be your new baseline, your new floor you're standing on versus the ceiling you're striving for.
Yeah, you mentioned them 3 types of people there, Rebecca. I think I've been every single one of those throughout
As
my
we
life. I've
all have
gradually,
before.
yeah, I've gradually gone through them stages. I think they're more stages for me, but yeah, it's quite interesting that you know that people don't decide to do it, and it is partly because I think with family and friends and then relationship dynamics. Once you've kind of molded yourself or presented yourself as a certain type of person, I think they feel comfortable with you in that way as well. So as soon as you start breaking out that box or behaving differently or doing different things, then they also feel a bit more unsafe and insecure, and they kind of almost want to pull you back in, not necessarily to be horrible or mean, but just because it's safer for you and it's safer for them.
Well, which actually isn't true at all, right? I think one of 3 things happen when you show up. 1, people easily work with you, almost never happens. 2, people get upset, freaked out, then they get over it and work with you. Almost always happens. 3, they walk. If that happens, they were always looking for a reason. They always inevitably would have left you. And that's okay. And I think we need to get a lot more comfortable with people coming and going from our lives. For a long time, I'll just admit and confess, I did a lot of false loyalty to relationships that had been around a long time. And instead of putting my loyalty into trying to preserve a relationship that's misaligned in this season of life, I always recommend always, always, always giving the person permission, and an opportunity to grow with you. So often we leave before we said, hey, this isn't working for me anymore. Hey, I love and respect you and this relationship enough to let you know what I need from it now and to see what you need from it now and to give it a shot to reinvent. That almost never happens. But when it does, now you can know if the relationship really could have worked out. And most of the time, at least for me, people delight and surprise me and they show up and they reinvent with me. But then the ones that didn't, I can know I'm clean on my end. We get divorced way too fast. We leave jobs way too fast. We leave relationships way too fast. And at the same time, we hang in there miserable too long, too often, right? And neither works. So let's just get real, hold people capable. And what if we looked at it, Erin, from the lens of the more authentic I am, the more I'm giving you permission to be that too. The more I'm modeling alignment as a possibility. Me with my soul singing gives you permission to live that way. And I don't need to wait for my soul to sing until everybody's showing up just right. I'm not a relationship expert because all my relationships are perfect. I'm a relationship expert because I've done the deep work to know who I am and to honor and respect and take care of who I am and to never abandon who I am for anyone for any reason. And that models a possibility to people that I think is desperately needed. And that example and that leadership is so sacred and beautiful. And you can be that example for people. So instead of thinking, oh, I might upset them, think I'm going to model what it means to be fully alive and free for every life I touch. And that matters.
That speaks to something I truly believe in, to be honest. To put yourself out there and to be vulnerable, it actually invites other people to do the same. And that's when you can actually create them genuine connections and actually have relationships that are worthwhile and that are actually deep and meaningful.
Absolutely. And everybody wants deep intimacy. But I think it's one of the things that scare us more than anything. But intimacy isn't love trauma. You saying yes to intimacy doesn't mean, and when I'm talking intimacy, I'm not just talking sex, I'm talking emotional intimacy. When my soul is connected to your soul and I want to know more and I want to share more of me and experience more of you. I think that's what we want. I think the real answer to what do you want to be when you grow up is loved from everybody, but we don't answer the question that way. And we're terrified of intimacy, but it's what we want more than anything. So, what if you just let it happen? And you being vulnerable is you just being honest about here's what I want, here's how I feel, here's what I need. And now I want to hear from you. And that's not going to kill anybody. It's going to save the relationship when you're vulnerable. But the other thing that I don't think gets talked about enough is the more vulnerable you are, the more attractive you are. And we think, oh my God, if I'm attractive, I don't feel safe. I don't want to receive that, right? I'd rather be miserable and defending how misunderstood I am than let myself have the intimacy, right? A lot of people are going through that and not consciously. And my work is about talking to your nervous system more than anything else, talking to the unconscious so we can look at, wait a minute, what is the programming? What are the deep beliefs that don't serve me if I want the deepest love imaginable? And I specialize in helping people create their comeback love story where they get to love their lives, love themselves, and have the deepest love imaginable. I want you to get 100% of the love you want. And I have books, I have courses. You can hire me privately if you want to go real fast because I'm real fast. And then you have to nurture it, right? Just because we get you the breakthrough doesn't mean you get to hold it. But I'll give you the steps, I'll give you the skill set to be emotionally open and available to the deepest intimacy available. And then it's just a constant practicing and reassessing, But I love this metaphor, Erin. We're all born this clear, and we're all born with an open heart, and we're all born not afraid of our emotions, right? You see a baby angry, sad, scared, joyful, excited in 5 seconds, going through it all. Whole human experience, no resistance, unapologetic. My work is about getting you clear again and then you knowing how to stay clear.
Yeah, kids have this kind of special way, don't they, of just seeing life and living life and just allowing themselves just to be raw and natural, and that's kind of what we want more of. Really, we want to go back to that childlike state. And for some reason, we've built a society that kind of drives that out of us and tries to quash that and keep it down. And I hate that. I've always hated that. I've always been kind of goofy and playful and wanted to be that way, and I always want to be that way. I never want to be that overly serious. Everything has to be a certain way. I just think that's just miserable for me. It's not the way I want to live my life.
Yeah. These are the conversations I have every day with clients. I had a woman once who was a fitness instructor with a gym. After being married 25 years and a housewife, she came to me and she said, I want to open this gym, but I'm going to have to leave my husband because there's no way he's going to support it. And I said, well, why don't we find out? So, long story short, we found out he would support her, reinvented the marriage. She started the business. Then she came to me bawling one day saying, I don't know who I really am, the miserable me at home or the me running my company, working with these women. And what I said to her is the real you is the one that's fully alive. The you at home is who you still are being in survival. And it's safe to trust that's not who you are. Because she was thinking her at home is who she really is. And she gets an escape from that in her career, in her business. It's the opposite. That's the real you. Bring her everywhere you go. Bring him everywhere you go. Bring them everywhere you go. The real you. And if you can do it here, you can do it everywhere. It's just we don't know it's safe. And when we are the most attractive version of ourselves, then we have to deal with how attractive we are and letting ourselves receive all this love we've wanted, but that we thought we couldn't have. And that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I've definitely had worse problems than that. I can assure
Right.
you.
Like, that's our number one problem. Letting in the love. Great.
So, Rebecca, you've got your book.
Yeah.
Is just the one book you've got at the minute?
Yes, this
Yeah.
is just my baby. I wrote it immediately coming out of cancer. Like, how did I actually get through this? And then I looked back at how I'd gotten through so much. And I gave people the secret magic sauce to identify patterns, identify survival, breakthrough. And I give you all the exercises, all the gold you need to set yourself free, reinvent your life, live your life on your terms.
Cool. Where can people find that book?
So you can buy Coming Back to Life, A Roadmap to Heal from Pain to Create the Life You Want anywhere books are sold. But you can also just go right to RebeccaSilence.com and I have a tab there, books, and you can buy it from your favorite publisher. You can go to Amazon or your favorite distributor, I should say. It's everywhere.
Cool. And did you say you do courses as well?
Yes, I created the Emotional Survival Kit is my number one course to also take your life to the next level or your relationship. So what the Emotional Survival Kit is brilliant at is helping a couple reinvent their marriage without years of therapy, without having to pay me privately, which you can certainly do, without having to get divorced. Before you get divorced, my God, take my Emotional Survival Kit. It's only $599 and it is all the couples work that I do boiled into a course. And you can again take it for your relationship with yourself, but you can also do it with your partner. And that's also available at RebeccaSilence.com.
Cool. Cool. I'll make sure that the links go to the show notes for all that stuff so
Yeah.
people can find you and get in touch with you. Um, I've got a couple more questions before we wrap things up a little bit. So, what's something you've had to forgive yourself for, and how did that process unfold?
Yeah. So this is a big one. And actually the two chapters I get the most positive feedback about are my forgiveness chapter and coming back to life and my body chapter, how to reinvent your relationship with your body. And for me, where I had to do the most forgiveness work was forgiving myself for how awful I had been to my body for so many years. I put myself through hell with, having sex when I didn't want to, in ways I didn't want to, with eating disorders, with abusing alcohol, with depriving myself of nutrition and sleep, and just blaming my body for everything that went wrong. I often talk about the book, but I almost never share what I'm about to share. The book, the original title of the book, I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly before. The original title of the book was I'm Not Too Fat Unless I Look in the Mirror, because I blame my body for everything. And I used to say, well, if I wasn't so fat, then this would have happened. Before cancer, I was 110 pounds marathon runner. Like, I was never too fat, but I told myself I was. And I was so cruel. And I had to forgive myself, for all of the horrific ways I treated my body. But let me just really quickly share what I believe forgiveness is all about, because I have a really unique, interesting spin on forgiveness. I look at forgiveness as loving as fully and as deeply as I did before I got hurt. Getting back to the love you are is the sign you've forgiven. And it's almost never about the other person that you think you need to forgive. I've been deeply and severely abused and traumatized by primary caregivers, family members. I even had a mentor that I didn't realize was one of the most abusive relationships of my life, that I had to forgive myself for not realizing that for so long and for staying in it for as long as I did. But it's not about forgiving them. It's about getting back to the best of you and knowing, this person is in a lot of ways innocent. They're doing the best they can from their level of consciousness, powerlessly taking their power back, and playing out their patterns. But you participating is what you need to forgive yourself for, almost always. But that's different than believing you allowed it or caused it. You didn't allow it, you didn't cause it, you participated until you knew better. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's an important way to look at it, because that kind of shifts that from just that blame that that it's your fault again, that you're not good enough and that kind of
Not your
stuff.
fault. It's not your fault, but it is your work. It's not your fault, but it is your work. Yeah.
It is, and it's a constant process, right? It's there's no finish line. We're always working on ourselves. We're always growing. We're always
You
working
gotta
towards the
be
end.
clearing again and clearing again and clearing again and clearing again. Yes.
When you look back on your life now, Rebecca, what are you most proud of, personally and professionally, really?
I'm really proud of my marriage. It is my wildest dream come true, beyond all my expectations. I think a lot of people, they have a dream of love and they almost never get it, let alone exceed it. My husband and I have exceeded our dream of love that we both had. And I think it is for sure, hands down, the number one proudest accomplishment of my life, having this deep spiritual relationship, deep intimacy. Because I think it's easy to be our best single and fabulous. But when you know how to stay that you and become even more of who you could be because of a relationship, that's magic. And most people think of relationship as the source of their pain or their happiness. And relationship is just here for our soul evolution, to help us see how healed we are, how much healing there still is to do. And it's a whole different animal to grow with somebody. So my marriage, I'm very proud of. My body, I'm very proud of. My book and the emotional survival kit. I just want as many hearts and homes to get access to these two products as possible, because between the book and the emotional survival kit, it's everything you need to clear generational trauma patterns that you inherited that aren't yours, that your kid don't just deserve to have passed on to them. So those are my proudest accomplishments, and my children are a huge part of this.
I love that. And yeah, it is very difficult to grow with a person. And, if you find the right person, does just amplifies who you are and, what you're all about. And if you could do that for each other, then that's that's a pretty good relationship.
Well, and I would just dare to say, you're not gonna find the right person. You just commit to a person. There's nobody you couldn't do this with if you're committed and so are they. So it's about finding a person as committed as you are to having the greatest, deepest love story imaginable. And this just doesn't have to be romantic. I have a best friend of 20 years. We've reinvented and reinvented and reinvented. And in many ways, she's one of the deepest, most intimate relationships of my life. So pick someone to commit to. Don't think it's about finding the right person, because that will take you into seek and do not find territory.
Yeah, I think I think we do that a lot, don't we? We think, oh, we'll find this person that just makes everything okay, fixes everything, does everything, when actually it never works like that. It's always a 50-50. There's always, a balance to be had. So yes, yeah, and I think that for some reason, I don't know if you had that experience as well, but you kind of grow up thinking, oh, you have to find somebody who's going to make you happy, but
Well, right.
I
And
don't
then I
know.
have all this experience now helping couples for almost 2 decades. The other person isn't your problem ever. They're helping you see where you are in your spiritual alignment journey 100% of the time. Take the pressure off them.
Abs- Yeah, and ultimately, you've got to bring yourself to the relationship, bring your best version of you, really. That vulnerable, self-aware version of yourself, really, to the relationship, to give it the best chance. Because if you're not willing to do that and you can't do that, then it's going to be really, really difficult to get anybody to to kind of make that relationship work, really.
Right. And it's all about you just deciding and committing to giving yourself permission to turning the volume all the way up on the truth of who you are. So you know you did. I think it's really important in relationships, especially, to not have regrets. And how you don't have regrets is you showed up. You said the thing. You did the thing. You gave them the opportunity to work with you, grow with you, understand you, so that from there, you did your part. You're clean on your end. I think that's so game changing.
Absolutely. Rebecca, I'm going to kind of bring this into land now. Uh, do you have any final thoughts or any final messages that you want to leave us with?
Just very simply, be careful with each other's hearts.
Powerful message that, actually.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And I'll make sure all the links go in the show notes so people can find you and get in touch
Yeah.
with you or get hold of your
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. Do yourself a favor and get the book. You have every right to come back to life right now. And I'm honored to support you. And thank you for having me, Erin. What a beautiful conversation.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. Take care.